Greetings to you, Busisa. So good to see you again after a few years. So good to see you alive and following the Lord and leading a fantastic business. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about who you are, your current situation in the workplace and otherwise, maybe family, whatever you feel is appropriate, just to give us a flavor of who you are?
Thank you, Lloyd. So my name is Busisa Moyo, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of United Refineries Limited. That's my primary and main business responsibility on a daily basis. It's an edible oils, cooking oil and stock feeds manufacturing business based in the south of Zimbabwe, which is close to the border with South Africa and Botswana. And that's where our factory is located, but we are a national company, so we distribute our products nationally in Zimbabwe. We say we are number 2 or number 3. We never claim to be the first or the largest. We say the number 2 or the number 3 in the edible oils and soap spaces, and also stock feeds. We export as well to South Africa and to Namibia, and more recently Angola and Botswana. So those are our export markets, but our raw materials come from all over the world. We import from Argentina, from China, New Zealand on the animal fats. So, it's really it's a little company in Africa, but well connected around the world. It's an 85-year-old company, so it's been around. It was founded by a Jewish family called the Levine brothers. So it's been around for 86 years this year.
Is that where the name comes from? Or Levine? Or is that just me making that up?
So United Refineries, we are United Refineries. Olivine is actually competition. I think they were involved. I think one of the brothers was actually involved at the start of Olivine, which is why we look very similar, and people actually confuse us as the same company. So it's likely that the two brothers, started it off, and one of them came this side and the other one stayed in Olivine, and then it was taken over by Heinz, the international company. So, but we are United Refineries. We've always been United Refineries.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So maybe tell us why you decided to get into this organization, and maybe how did you train? Where did you go through chartered accountancy? How did you get into managing a business? Because it doesn't just happen overnight. And why did you just choose to stay in Bulawayo in Zimbabwe when everyone else was fleeing and running away? So just tell us a little bit about maybe the earlier stages of getting involved in this corporation.
Yeah. So after I finished articles with Lloyd, I joined TA Holdings. So I worked with Deloitte, and then that was my job out of school, and I worked with Deloitte for 5 years, and then I joined TA Holdings as a divisional accountant, and then I rose up very quickly through the ranks, and I ended up, because I had an interest, I didn't like accounting, but I really enjoyed finance, which is the corporate finance side of things. So we, at the time I joined TA Holdings, they were creating a corporate finance team. So I was seconded to that as sort of an associate corporate finance executive. I ended up being the investments and monitoring manager. And I ended up here because the finance director left the business suddenly, and there was a gap. And United Refineries was one of the companies that was in my stable of investments that I used to look after. And because it's located in the area where I come from, my chairman said, well, whilst we're looking for a finance director, don't you want to go there and just hold fort? This was in 2005, February 2005. And I came for 6 months and held fort. And they couldn't find one. I said, do you want to do another 6 months? And just kept extending. And, sort of 15 years later, I'm still here. So, and lots has happened since then. We did a management buy-in of the business from TA Holdings, and the chairman was very nice to allow us to acquire it. And we came out of the group and became an independent business. Went through a difficult time from 2009 to 2012. The business was closed. That was the height of Zimbabwe's problems. 2008 to 2012, for about 4 years.
Wow.
The business was literally comatose and shut. And maybe just to back up a little bit, when I was in 2007, after 2 years I was here, there was a price controls that were introduced by the Zimbabwe government. And
I remember that.
It was a difficult, you remember that? Yeah. It was a difficult time and leaders were being arrested. And my managing director was a very nice gentleman by the name of Stuart Grimshaw. And Stuart Grimshaw unfortunately got caught up in that and he was arrested. He was a 72-year-old man, so quite elderly, and it really spooked him to spend a night in jail over something like that. And literally the next Monday, so he went in for a night, the next Monday he resigned. And I was this FD who had been seconded, and the company said, well, you're the guy who's there, it's a crazy time, you look after it. That's how I became the managing director of the business. Nobody wanted. So I say, I was never a managing director because I applied. It's just nobody wanted the job. So, I just walked in there, but God had some plans. And it was a matter of, when I look back on it, I can see a lot of destiny in there, that God was orchestrating everything and was laying a foundation for what would later happen. And I'm still on that journey.
Oh, fantastic. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about what you did in those 4 years of shutdown? How did you keep the business, the staff? I don't know, what happened, just briefly?
So it was an interesting time. So the 4-year hiatus, what I did was, and it was also driven by the fact that not just the economy was difficult, but we then bought the business, or did a management buy-in, and I bought 42% of the business. I had a partner who had 58% of the business, and he felt because I had such large shareholding, I was going to run the business for my own ends and for my own benefits and to his disadvantage, which was a surprise because when I invited him to be my partner, we had agreed that I would run the business. So it was a little bit of a disagreement, and not so that I don't present a problem because he had put in his money in that. I stepped out, which was a big mistake because we then took the marketing director and made her the managing director, but she was a marketing person, really not operational or general business experience, because that's what you need at the top. So that was a bit of a mistake in that, and that led to, and add to that, a very difficult environment. So it didn't work out, and the business within a very short space of time, started to basically not be able to operate. I had a lot of the relationships. There were people, suppliers, customers. I quickly built the relationship. She didn't have any, and they didn't trust, and the banks didn't have confidence. So it was I went out and I was consulting. I was doing consulting work, being a corporate finance person. I started a broking business with a friend, and we were buying and selling businesses in Zimbabwe, doing consulting work as far as Ghana. So that was just to look after my family and make sure my family, because I was no longer, earning an income directly from the business. There were no dividends coming really because the business was doing badly. So I had to, do something else and earn an income.
Yeah. Wow. And how did you get the business? How did you get back into the business, and how did you kick it off for part two?
Again, part two was very interesting. So I was out for 4 years. So I say I've been here for a total of 12 years because 4 years I was out. In 2012, a friend of mine had 8,000 tons of soybean, and he needed a place to process them because Olivine refused to process his soybean. So he's a farmer. His name is Nigel Philp. He comes from farming stock, and he managed to get these beans. And he wanted to do what's known as toll processing, so contract processing. And he had an agreement with Olivine, and for some flimsy reason, they had a fallout, in such a significant fallout that he decided he was going to uplift the beans and look for another place to process them. And I remember that afternoon, he called me. It was actually around about, spring, September or thereabouts of 2012. And he called me and he said, look, I have a problem. I have these 8,000 tons of beans and I need somewhere to process them. Olivine, which was the one option, he had a fallout with. The others he didn't trust. So he says, you're the only person I can trust. I said, well, this plant hasn't been running, for like 4 years. And he said, what does it take? I said, well, Nigel, maybe $250,000 to just spruce up the machinery. That was my estimate. And he says, well, I'll give you that. I'll advance you $250,000. I'll send the beans to you and I want you to process them. Can you do it?
Wow.
So I said, well, yeah, I can try. And so we did that, and he moved his beans here, and I got a couple of engineers here in Bulawayo to help me get the plant going again. And we managed to process those beans, and the business started actually to come alive.
Wow. And
I was still outside. I was just a vice chairman because my 58% partner was the senior partner. I was the junior partner. And I was still outside doing all this. But Nigel had asked me that whilst he had his beans here, he wanted me to come into the factory every day as if I was an executive. So I'd come, and sort of hang around and, oversee things and make sure that, things work out. And then a very strange but God-inspired thing happened. There was an old man who used to work here in the factory. His name is Tebe. One Sunday after preaching, it sounds like a story, but it really happened. So again, funny enough, the church where I first pastored is 500 meters from where the factory is. And it wasn't by design. The church where I was fellowshipping opened a branch. Initially, it was at an old neutral shopping complex, and then the church grew bigger and needed bigger premises. So we had to move to a factory shell, which is literally opposite the factory. So, and I don't know how this gentleman heard that I was pastoring there. He came on a Sunday, and after preaching, he stood there and he said, Pastor, if you don't mind, I'd just like to talk to you. And he started crying. And I'm like, sir, why are you crying? Dala, what's the matter? And he's like, Moyo, you need to come back to that factory. If you come back, that factory will revive and will run and we will do well. We've been there. We haven't been paid for so many months. We're struggling. Our families are struggling, and the company, is not in good shape. Can you come back? And so, and there was something, I know it was God, because when he spoke, I prayed for him afterwards, trying to dismiss him. Maybe he just needs prayer. He's just emotional. I'll pray for him. But it stuck with me. I just couldn't shake it. The whole week I could just kept seeing his face. I kept hearing his voice. And I know that when that happens, when there's a repeat, like Samuel in the temple with Eli, I know when there's a repeat, it's God saying something to me. So I said to the Lord, Lord, I'm going to go back. It wasn't really putting a fleece before God exactly, but I said, I'm going to go back. And first of all, I don't want to fight with my partner who thinks, you know, if I run the business, I'm going to be making money whilst he's sitting in Harare. I don't want any problems with him. Funny enough, I came back and when I came back, he was like, yeah, you know, we already have this lady who's the MD, so you're going to be the CEO. And he was like very, very, because I guess he could see the business was struggling. So he lost nothing. And my presence, he realized after 4 years what my presence meant. And so he didn't fight on that. So I came back. I wasn't drawing a salary for I think maybe 9 months. So I was coming back working, but no salary. And while I was here, while I was doing that, the part two, and now I was struggling because I had my consulting business. I had clients that I had built who needed service, who needed my time. I had a factory that needed to be turned around and built up again. So it was a very stressful time for me. But things happened very quickly because Nigel, who had given me that 8,000 tons, came back and said, well, you know, I have some partners, some foreign partners in my business, and they asked me, where did I do that 8,000 tons? Who did I process it with? And I said, I did it with a friend, and they want to meet you. And it's a big company, a listed company in South Africa. And they met with me and said, well, what can we do to help? So I said, well, you know, this is what we can do. And we got talking. Eventually, they bought the 58%. I got diluted a little bit down to about 16%. And we started to work together and to build the business. And, you know, that's been the journey since. They since exited that line of business, but I got new partners in and from South Africa again. And we've been working very well together. And from a business that was closed, now for a business in Africa, doing a turnover of between $25 to $30 million a year per annum, made profitable. And now we are thinking of doing things and going to the next level, expanding the business. So it's been a journey.
Wow.
But God has been very much in it, and I've seen God's hand and His presence. We managed to build a team. I've got a great team of very loyal, committed. It's a young team. If you see them, you'll be surprised. So people come here. We had a visit from the president in July, and they were surprised at the average age. I'm the oldest. I'm 46, and I'm the oldest, one of the oldest by a long shot.
Wow.
You know, so it's a very interesting, and everybody could see that there's something that's not just man or skill or human talent that's at play. And so that's the testimony. And of course, because of the work that we've done, we have been an example of what can happen in Zimbabwe. That's why people take notice. That's why I've been invited to be an advisor to the president, because the story then got around that there's this young guy who led a team that managed to get this factory in a Bulawayo that's been shut down. I mean, 90% of the factories that were here don't exist anymore. And so the story for an African city that was the industrial capital of a small country, it's a story of revival and a story of hope. And that story inspires many because there's so much hopelessness. And so I get the opportunity to talk, to share the story that I'm sharing with you today to non-Christians. And I don't hesitate to say that this is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our sight.
That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Can you just tell us a little bit about these other roles that you have picked up along the way? Like, for example, this being an advisor to the president and maybe any industry bodies that you're involved in. I don't know what happened to your consultancy. Did that go by? That's all dead. So just tell us a little about the other things you're doing, and maybe your role as well as, being an itinerant preacher in various churches, and maybe anything that you do in the community as well.
Wow. Yeah. Again, people always ask, how do you do it? And how do you balance it? And I say, my answer is always, I don't. I just listen. I listen to the Holy Spirit. And I follow, and he tells me what to do, and that's what I've done. So my consultancy business, Moyo Africa Financial Advisory, it was called, is still there. The corporate structure is still there, but it was me. It was just a former, I did have associates. I was starting to build up to employ young people to help me because it was growing and I needed to service my clients. But I sort of had to put a pause on that because this role was very demanding. At the time of turnaround, people quickly took notice, like I said, and without exception, my colleagues in industry, wanted to do business with me, wanted to get involved, and I became the chamber president for the Manufacturers Association, which is called CZECH here, Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, the local chapter. So I became the chairperson of that, or president, and which is, a business member organization. So all the manufacturing companies come together and we lobby government and we engage government on policies that are progressive, that can help the country to go forward. And advocacy, lobbying are the key mandates of for the manufacturing sector, are the key mandate for the CZI. So I became the chair of that, and I was very vocal in the group about policies that work, things that don't work, and again we come together as local chambers. We come together nationally, the Mutare Chamber, the Midlands Chamber, the Harare Chamber, and very quickly, I think people recognize my sincerity, my honesty, my passion for, they think it's passion for business. I think it's passion for seeing things work. So they quickly took notice, and they wanted me to be national chairperson. So I became the president of CZI in 2015, position which I held for 2 years. And again, CZI itself was a dying body. It was, this CZI, I'm talking about, some of the founders were Cecil John Rhodes and his friends. So it's been around for about 140 years, odd years. So it's an old fraternity of business people. And it obviously was outdated, no longer relevant, no longer talking to the issues, and not run in the way that it should. And we, with a few friends, we decided to shake it up and start to, really advocate in a current, futuristic sort of manner. And that brought a lot of life to the organization, of course. Again, something that obviously the Lord was doing. And that's when I believe the Lord opened doors for me publicly, because now I was engaging with ministers, whether it's the Minister of Industry, who was Mike Beamer, was the minister during my tenure. And we became very, very close because we had to work together. He was crafting policies for industry or for business, and I was the president. So we had to talk weekly almost. And he would invite me to meetings to speak on behalf of private sector. And that's when, I was my demeanor has never been one of criticizing government or, and you talked about philosophy. So this is it's a weakness in a way, some people see it as being pliant or compliant. But my approach has never been to be roughshod and critical, but to point to things that work and to principles without criticizing, to be polite, to be respectful of even people that in certain instances, Lloyd, I do not like, but to be professional and present my views, my beliefs, and why I think what we are proffering or what we are suggesting will work based on research, based on evidence, based on practice elsewhere. You know, so government felt very comfortable with somebody like that. Even though some of my suggestions were radical and against their beliefs, they were very welcoming of my approach and the way I engage. And so that obviously opened doors for me to be invited in, because they know that I won't call them names, I won't abuse them, I won't disrespect them publicly. So they could take me to a meeting and I would bring my points across without, you know, belittling them or demeaning them. And that's opened a lot of doors as well. And obviously that led to them being aware. And when they were looking for advisors, it was, because of my history with CZI, I was actually brought in as a business and economic advisor because the current president, when he was vice president and I was the president of CZI, I spent a lot of time explaining some of the principles to him and why, we believe some of the things like free markets, why free markets are good, why allowing business to do business is actually a good thing and not a bad thing for government. Things like that. Why allowing markets to decide on price is actually a good thing. And one of the things that we did was this sector, and I'm not in any way claiming credit for it, but because of the revival of United Refineries, when we revived this company in 2012, 2013, 2014, into 2015, that was the intense period of bringing it back. There were 3 companies in our sector, 3 national edible oil, sizable companies that could do, say, 1,000 tons or 1 million liters of oil per month. There were just 3. It was United Refineries, Olivine, and a company called Surface Investments. Because of the policies we recommended to government, today we have 8 players, including 3 multinationals. ETG, Wilmar, and Willerton, who are now, operating within the country because of policies that we work together with government. You want local manufacturing, this is what you have to do. This is what you do to support local industry. Today, before this call, I was talking to the Permanent Secretary for Industry and an advisor to the Minister of Finance on how we get the cooking oil is now produced locally, or edible oil is now produced locally, but the raw materials, a lot of them are still imported. So now our subject is how do we localize the raw materials? And of course, that will solve a lot of unemployment problems by getting people back on the farms. And so now we ask the question, with what happened in Zimbabwe with land reform and so on, how do you address it so the land is productive again? Because if we can do that, we will have raw materials. So it's a business approach to solving social problems, social problems of unemployment. And we've been growing soyas from 10,000 tons. Last year, we produced 70,000 tons. That's a 7-fold increase. We would like to grow that to 240,000. It's very slow, very painful, very difficult, lots of interference, lots of political interference and political economy aspirations or conflicts. But when you put an economic case on the table, it's very difficult because government doesn't want to be spending forex to give us forex to import raw materials. So we say, well, if you don't want to do that, what you have to do now is get farming working again. Mm. And so it's an exciting journey because that's what I've been waiting for, because we are an agro-based country through and through. We have lots of fertile land. We have the most dams in the world, density of dams in sub-Saharan Africa. We got lots of water bodies, just not harnessed. So now we're going on to the next phase of getting community working again. And so I pray, when I pray for myself, I pray the prayers of Solomon, I pray Joseph, I pray Daniel, and the scripture that I've been standing on for the last 10 years is found in Matthew chapter 12, and he talks of Jesus, and Jesus said, a greater than Solomon is here. And it needs wisdom to balance. And the other one comes from Genesis, talks about Joseph, talks about a man in whom was the Spirit of God. And we know Joseph was a reformer of an agrarian system, an agricultural system, to help his people and his country in 7 years of famine and drought. And we've been going through a famine. In these days, we call famine, we have a description for it. It's called poverty. And how do you break poverty? I think the answer is in getting people to work. Why I like agriculture, I'm not against mining, but I like agriculture because it's broad-based. Everybody can farm. Everybody can get onto a land and produce something. And once that mentality sinks into a nation, you can then migrate productivity to other areas, to technology, to hospitality, to construction. But it starts with, being able to tend a piece of land, make it productive. And as a Christian, if you have faith, let's see the fruits of your faith. Let's see the fruit of what you can. If God is for you and he's a God of fruitfulness, be fruitful and multiply, let's see you get a piece of land and let's see you producing from it. Then we know that your faith is real. It's a real faith that can produce things. And so I can't call it a philosophy or an approach. It's just how God has led me. And so one of the things we've been saying is, how do we make farming lit? This is to be lit means exciting. It means vibrant. How do we make farming lit for young people so that our young people who've grown up, in a generation that has not been productive, so that they get into a mindset of productivity and not chasing after, things that are not productive, which is why they end up in theft, they end up in prostitution, they end up, doing things that probably they shouldn't be doing. And I think that as a business person in Africa, we can use business economics to solve social and political problems. And that's the philosophy, if you want to call it, Lloyd, that I follow. So, and ministry, I slowly, I think the Holy Spirit ministering to me, and a dear man of God, my senior pastor in the church where I was, one of the things that he said to me was, and I believe that word was true, was, for you, there is no business and ministry. It's all one thing. It's all one thing. It's one line. You are always just moving on that same line, but it's you. So, and the ministry, whether it's, and a lot of people in government know I'm a pastor, I'm a Christian. And so, they will get me to, whether it's opening in a word of prayer or giving a benediction or a blessing or, and that's an opportunity, obviously, to minister the gospel in areas that a traditional minister may not get into, and to talk on economic issues. And a lot of the work that I do nationally is pro bono, or comes at a cost to me. And a lot of people are aware of that. It actually costs me. If I didn't get involved, I'd save a lot of money. I remember driving to Inyanga for not once, not twice, not 3 times, driving through the night sometimes to attend meetings because I've been invited, but I wasn't given the resources, and some people were hoping I wouldn't show up. And I'd still drive because, I have a sense that, we who call on the name of Jesus Christ need to rise up and take spaces to demonstrate that the Jesus who has been preached in churches for so many years and is a real Jesus who is in the people, who once he is in the heart of somebody, gets that person to do good, not to earn money, but because he is good and he wants good for people. So that becomes a point of ministry, and it's very humbling to be used by God that way. But it's also very humbling to the people that I come into contact with. It puts a fear in them because they know they're doing it for gain, but you're not. And it gives you authority almost instantly because you're not paid to do, but you're as passionate, sometimes even more passionate about the issues. Whenever I minister in the church or to folk, it's to equip them, so that in their day-to-day, they can make a difference to their neighbor, who is the person in the office next door for 8 hours of the day. The neighbor at home, they only have 2 daylight hours, 3 daylight hours, but the person in the office next door, it's 8 hours. So it's that person. That's your ministry. That's your neighbor. And are you making an impact? Are you demonstrating Christ in how you do business in a country that maybe is laden with corruption, and a country that has, it's not just government now, it's a culture. It's a culture that is seeped into the nation. And it's not just Zimbabwe, by the way. It's Africa. Sometimes I'll drive through from Durban through to Gaborone, and the experience is the same. So I think this is our role as the children of God in the last day, to demonstrate Christ in a real way and to make a difference.
That's fantastic. That's been just so, I've been spellbound just listening to what you've been doing, what God has been doing through you. That's a fantastic, testimony. Just a really last question, just to close us off. A lot of people have been saying, why don't you get involved in politics? Just give us one sentence on that, and then we'll close off.
I'm no politician. I am not a politician. I'm not motivated by holding political office, and God hasn't deposited that desire in me. I do believe in influence, positive influence, as a business person, as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, as a chairman. I'm the chairman of the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair, and I believe in positive influence where I am. I believe that we don't all have to be politicians to make a difference. I believe we can make a difference where we are and be as passionate as if we were the president of the country, and be as passionate as we would be if we were the Minister of Industry, because industry employs people. It creates sustainable economic development that is predictable, adding value, all those things, to be passionate for the right things. I don't believe that the only place to express your love for your country and your countrymen and to do good to them is to hold political office. I don't believe that. And because of that, it's not out to prove something. I just need to stay here for as long as I can so that there is more people, because then it will be easier to be a politician when you have citizens that think like that.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, to hear your wisdom and your experiences, which are, some of them have been really, amazing. Things have hinged on conversations and employees coming to talk to you after church and things like that. So God has been remarkable. So I just want to say thank you for the time. Thank you, Busisa. It's been amazing.
Thank you, Lloyd. It's been great. Thank you for talking to me, and God bless you.